A very good evening, a warm welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine, brought to you by Norman Goodfellows, and welcome to what I hope you will be suitably impressed by, a Dan who is not noticeably larger than the last time seen on the show. And that is because I survived my mother-in-law and her Greek cohorts. It was Greek Easter over the weekend past, which saw me down in the Free State. And Greek Easter is an interesting time. It's the most important part of the year for the Greek community, and having married into a Greek family, by extension, it's very important to me. But it is also a time where you spend the week fasting, and only the Greeks could come up with a fast where you're still allowed to eat prawns and lobster and calamari, but it is still relatively strict. No meats, no dairy. And I joined in for the week, and you get through all sorts of lentil soups and rice soups. And then you get to Sunday. And Sunday is when you are expected to single-handedly eat your body weight in lamb, while the Greek yayas, the grandmothers, watch very closely to ensure that you are gobbling up everything they have served you and more. It's a wonderful celebration, but it means you can't really walk properly for the ensuing week. So I am on a strict diet of sparkling water and lentil fumes for the next few days. But a big thank you to the Greek community down in Valcom. Lovely people, lovely community. I had a really good weekend. And there you see, that was from yesterday. That was just my selection. That's about 400 kilograms of lamb all down the throat. And that was just part of the array of dishes. It's a wonderful time. It's a real family feel, and it has left me feeling still rather full, but I managed to not overindulge too much because there is much indulgence to be done in the coming weeks. And that brings us rather nicely to today's show, and something we've been working on since the end of last year. And it's taken a while to get it just right. At least I think we've got it just right. And it's something many of you have been asking for some time. And that is a Dan Really Likes Wine selection or offering of some sort. What wine do you recommend, Dan? What can we get from you? Where is this incredible wine you so often discuss on the show? And to a large extent, that wine is already available at Norman Goodfellows. But what we thought we'd do is go one step further and create a monthly subscription where you can put your name down, and every month, either a case of white, a case of red, or a case of each if you're feeling particularly thirsty, and I hope you are, where I found people who I really like, principally in the wine industry, people who are maybe a little more bespoke, a little more off the wall, people who've got wine that's a little harder to come by, some older vintages, some varietals that we don't see a great deal of. Just a selection of wine that I felt took you beyond what you might normally be drinking and gave you the opportunity to try something really cool and really fun, and to do so at a pretty good price. And what we've done really is just blackmailed all of the winemakers into delivering wine at ridiculous prices, and they've been very kind and done exactly that. So this evening on the show, not all of them, because there are 12 different producers for the month of June, which is when this kicks off. But we've got 5 of them, plus Jason from Norman Goodfellows to give us a little context on how it's all going to work, to get thoughts not just on the wine that they have very kindly made available for our first month, but also some thoughts on each other's wine and the 7 other wines not represented by the winemakers this evening. That's purely because with all 12, we'd have a bit of a railway station at rush hour kind of show. So we've got a wonderful collection of really cool guests that'll all be familiar to you on the show, and very familiar to you as some of South Africa's top winemaking talent, also some of South Africa's top surfing talent, but that's just an added bonus. And very shortly, we will jump into the show, meet our guests, and find out what is on the lineup for the white box and the red box for the Dan Really Likes Wine subscription service. The Dan Really Likes Wine selection that kicks off 1st of June, but which you can start subscribing to this week and make sure that you don't miss out. So that's coming up in just a second. The tension is rising. What wine is going to be available to you? We'll find out in a moment. First of all, though, very quickly, some of the latest wine news. This is the call to entry, the clarion therein from the Diners Club International Wine List team. I think Carrie is still running this. Carrie Adams is the head judge. And this is for the Diners Club Wine List and the Winemaker and Young Winemaker of the Year. and it's a competition that has got a fair pedigree to it. It's been going for a while now, and each year it affords winemakers to enter the competition. They have to do so with a particular grape, and in they go to the judging process. And a winemaker and a young winemaker and the wine list now as well are getting the accolade from Diners Club International. So wine list, and jump online, won't take you too long to find all the details you need, and you could be a 2024 winner with the Diners Club International Wine List Awards for this year. Now, this was on Friday. Very sadly, I wasn't able to make it because, as the photo suggests, it was a great deal of fun. What does Sauvignon Blanc pair well with? Well, lawn bowls is one of the answers. You can see RJ from Walser in one of those photos, the current chair of Sauvignon Blanc South Africa. And every year for the last few years, they have got together, have the Sauvignon Blanc Association with a number of top producers, and there are many in South Africa, and taking the opportunity to not just have fun and play lawn bowls, but also use it as a fun platform to amplify some pretty key messaging. And the big one, and it's something we have banged on about regularly here on the show, that is the age worthiness of Sauvignon Blanc. I'm not saying you have to keep your Sauvignon Blanc for 30 or 40 years, but that you don't have to drink it. Johannesburg, are you listening? The year that it comes out. It's not a sell-by date, it is a vintage. And that giving Sauvignon Blanc 2-3 years just gives so much Sauvignon Blanc a little more balance, a little more depth, takes some of the fresh edge off the acidity, and gives you a wine that I think finds itself in a far more pleasing space and makes it ever more pleasant to drink alongside the game of lawn bowls. So thanks to the Lawn Bowls Association and Sauvignon Blanc for coming together. Sorry I couldn't join you last week. It did look like a lot of fun, but thanks for the incredible support you give to the white grape that continues to do wonders for South African wine around the world. And this is a Vondeling tasting. This is coming up on the 7th of May, so next week at Norman Goodfellows. We've had a number. The one we had last week with the guys from Springfield was a rousing success. We had a completely full house. You could barely move, and it is a very large Norman Goodfellows store. I expect something similar with Vondeling. If you'd like to come along, 5:30 for 6 on the 7th of May. We'd love to have you. Jeff, that's tomorrow. My apologies. It's tomorrow. It's not next week. That is tomorrow. There are still a last few spots available. You can get those on the Norman Goodfellows website. It is a small donation. I think it's about 100 Rand. 100 Rand of that goes to charity. It's just to make sure you've paid so you come, but you're getting a great deal of value, some lovely wine, and a wonderful introduction to, in this case, the wines of Vondeling. So hopefully you can make it tomorrow if you're up in the Johannesburg area. All right. Well, welcome to the show. Lovely to have you all on with us, and to all of the Greek family and friends who are watching the show. Christos Anesti. Hope you had a lovely, lovely weekend. Let's jump in to our collection of guests on the show this evening. And in no particular order, we say a very warm welcome to Andrea Mullineux, who joins us now for the first time on the show. So Andrea, a very, very warm welcome. We've also got Henry Kotze joining us. Henry, lovely to have you with us. Not from Mulderbosch, but as you can see, he's got a very Pilgrim-like look on his face today because it is his other brand. Pieter Walser joins us from the South African Society of Naming Wines with Obscure Titles. We have Gordon and Bevan Newton-Johnson. Many people think they are father and son. They're not. Bevan is actually Gordon's older brother, not his dad, but it is a regular mistake. And then Michael van der Venter, who is probably my favorite person in the South African wine industry. And I have to say that live, because he keeps giving me very old wine for events he's not really supposed to let go. So, Michael, I won't tell anybody about all that wine. You've been sneaking out the Vinoteque to me. Guys, welcome. Lovely to have you all on the show. And thank you so much for joining us for what's a really, really exciting concept for me as a wine drinker as much as it is. And I'd like to kick off, Andrea, just before we look at the wine that you've got on it. How much does wine still excite you in terms of discovering stuff you haven't had before, finding something you didn't think was still available, and even though you make such extraordinary wine week in, week out, getting this delight that other people's wine can still give you?
Gosh, I mean, it's just so amazing, the world of wine. You know, wine is it brings us together. It's a cultural elixir. And so the ability to share wines that we've never had before, taste varieties that we, only read about in books. There's thousands and thousands of varieties out there. So sky's the limit for trying new things. And so, yes, incredibly excited by it, especially in the context of South Africa, where we don't have the same constraints of what we're allowed to experiment with what we plant as some other places in the world. And so it's a very exciting time to be in the wine industry, especially in South Africa.
Henry, you make not just your wine under the Mulderbosch label, but also the Pilgrim label that we are celebrating today. I know you get the chance to try plenty of wine, to explore plenty of wine. Is there still wine that comes across your desk, or you're out at a restaurant, or you go and join a mate for dinner and you go, hang on, I'm a winemaker, I've won awards, I've done this job for a while, I've never heard of this?
Oh, yes. No, there's a heck of a lot of unheard varieties out there, which we as winemakers probably 90% never will hear of, because of the regionality, the different areas where it's grown, which they obviously don't all export into South Africa. So you've got to go out and look for it. I've just come back from a bit of an international walk around, and just having a look at what's there in the fairs, in the wine shows, the global industry basically coming together under one roof. You are just astounded about the diversity, and yeah, for sure, you get surprises around every corner. And I think one thing is basically the same: is it's a small industry, but the variety is amazing. And it's so cool to discover. So as a winemaker, yes, you get surprised almost daily, and I'm pretty sure as a consumer, I mean, it's extremely exciting, because I don't think the learning will never end.
This is fitting directly into the philosophy behind exactly why we decided this would be a good idea. I see loads of regulars already on board, particularly on Instagram. Elena Mellis from Big Five Duty Free, Angela Lloyd, Derek Pratt-Jones, Mandy Dewing. Lovely to see you amongst many others already on the show. Chance to discover international wine is always great. Chances, Andrea said, to discover local stuff is pretty cool. Pieter, the chance to discover wine that is from areas you might not be anticipating. Grapes you might be scratching your head and think, I don't really know what this is. And this is a blank bottle of Pieter Walser specialty, because I'm not sure there's anybody who digs quite so deeply into finding stuff that sits happily in the slightly more obscure side of the wine scale and brings it to life quite so wonderfully.
Yeah, for me, it's very much about the kind of the story behind the wine. The moment you dig into why people are doing certain things, what inspired them, it's almost like kind of reading a book, and different chapters. So South Africa is full of that. There's so many areas, there's so many people doing new things, and they all got different motivations and inspired by different things. And what I find really interesting is getting to know these people, getting to know why they're doing stuff, and then basically kind of joining that adventure and exploring new places. I don't own any vineyards, so I'm not limited to what area. So I love just making random things from many places and learning about history and learning about land and learning about people in that kind of way.
It is such a learning curve, the world of wine. And when it's a learning curve for Pieter Walser, then it must be so much more for the rest of us. There is also the learning to be had of vintage. You heard me mention a little earlier that a big part of the Sauvignon Blanc call to action through the association last week on Sauvignon Blanc Day was to age Sauvignon Blanc a little and give it a little more time. If you take that to another level entirely, you have Michael and the Vinoteque. And we've had the opportunity, Michael, to do this together a few times, where you're able to dig back in time and to find wine from 10, 20, 30, in some cases 40 and 50 and more years ago. It's a different type of wine discovery, but I know it's something that you're enormously passionate about, and it's something that you love sharing with other wine drinkers and other wine fans.
Yes, Dan, I think my day job being Vinoteque and selling wines that are optimally matured, but my passion is really discovering older vintages through our tabernacle, our very old wine library at Adamtas. And you mentioning 20, 30, 40, 50 years old, but we've been privileged to recork via Amarim and our annual recorking clinic wines 200 years plus that have turned out to be in amazing condition. So that's really my passion, selecting these older vintages and then discovering the condition that they're in through our annual recorking clinic. And maybe on the subject of Chateau Libertas, last year we found 2 bottles of Chateau Libertas 1937. We opened them both under controlled conditions, and both were in immaculate condition. And it was such a privilege to be able to recork those 2 bottles and preserve them for future generations.
Now, we can't quite go back to 1937, but we do have something rather special from Michael and his tabernacle, which we'll reveal in just a moment. Before we start knocking off the wines that we do have in our opening month's selection for June that you can start subscribing to through Norman Goodfellows as of tomorrow. There might be people looking at this going, okay, well, that's pretty cool, but what if we don't all like the same wine? How does this fit in? Which is a good moment to bring in the 2 best-looking brothers in the wine industry. You 2 guys, Gordon and Bevan, obviously spend a great deal of time working around the world of wine, but I know there is the occasional bottle opened over dinner and over a braai as well. How much do the tastes differ, but how much do you also learn from each other and what each other's preferences are?
That's actually a difficult one, Dan. I think we've spent such a long time tasting wines and drinking wines together, and you could almost say that we have a bit of cellar palate with the wines that we've made ourselves. So especially if I'm tasting with Bevan or with Nadia, I always seem to find that we're pretty much on the same page with the kind of wines we like and the kind of wines that excite us. So yeah, I mean there is the odd differences in tastes, but I think we're pretty much streamlined in the way we taste and the wines that we like.
Bevan just nodding dutifully as the little brother should. I'm glad you're in agreement. Well, let's kick off with our wines then with the brothers Newton-Johnson, and the first one that we have. And this is a wine that I fell in love with a while ago. I think, Bev, you gave it to me. Must be close to a decade ago if you've been making it that long, but it was a fair while ago. And I remember drinking it, and you didn't let me know what it was, and I couldn't quite place it. And then it was revealed that it was probably the first glass ever I'd had of this wine called Albarino. And you being you, I thought, well, maybe this was something you just made up and it was something else entirely. But I duly researched it, and it turned out, no, it is an Iberian grape of some renown. And we have the 2022 Albarino as one of the 6 wines in the initial white selection. Bev, tell me a bit about this wine and what for you makes it so special.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Yeah, well done on that. I mean, it was 2014 was our first vintage of this grape, so it is a decade now, and it's amazing to think that it's been 10 years already working with it. It still feels like the young sort of new experience in the winery and on the farm. But it's been a lot of fun. I always kind of jokingly say working with Pinot Noir and Chardonnay hasn't been fun. They're very, very difficult task masters, and Albarino has been a breath of fresh air. It was actually my father that introduced us to this, and he said, if we look at where we are, right by the ocean, 5Ks, and working with granite soils, let's look at a fresh white that really typifies where we are. And that led us to Albarino. And we initially inquired in Spain and got told that we weren't Spanish enough, but thankfully there was some material in California. So we brought it in from the University of California, and we've now been working with it since 2011. And 14 was the first vintage.
And you have spread a little of the Albarino love because it is your wine, your vineyards that inspired the Albarino vineyards at Springfield. and I know there's a close relationship there, but it's still beyond those two. I think I can think of maybe one or two other people who do produce Albarino. So it is still very much a rarity. Gordon, from a winemaker's perspective, if you're introducing your Albarino to somebody for the very first time and they don't have a clue what it is, and they're thinking, should I order this on the wine list? Should I buy a selection of wine from a roguishly good-looking wine television host who's just starting a selection? What would your persuasive argument to the good be?
Yeah, I think, our first reason for bringing Albarino to our area was just, looking that it would just suit our area. I mean, its home is on the northwest coast of Iberia, and it's very wet, and it's close to the sea, and there's granite soil. So, those ticked a few boxes for us. And, we've still got a Sauvignon Blanc, and we've always had a Sauvignon Blanc, but I think we were looking for something special that really fitted in with our area, that would find its home in our area. And, having known very little about Albarino, just tasting around a bit before, once we got it in, we really started to see a wine, a fresh styled wine, but something with a bit more texture. And it's, it's somewhere in between a Sauvignon Blanc and a Chardonnay. But for me, it's just, it's got a lot more texture, and it's a wine that can develop complexity. So, especially with South Africans, I know Sauvignon Blanc is a big favorite among South Africans. They taste the wine and they understand it immediately, and I think that's a real plus point for it. It's easy to understand. It's really generous and just fresh, and you're looking for the next glass immediately.
I think that's a pretty compelling reason to kick off your white selection. And a big thank you to Gordon and Bevan, who have offered us that for the first box. We're going to come back to them with some thoughts on some of the other wine. But let's head over to our other guest who's got some white wine on our first month's list, and that would be Andrea, the Old Vine White. Just before I ask you about that, have you tried the Newton-Johnson Albarino, and Andrea? And if so, has it struck a chord?
Absolutely. Like they said, it's a Atlantic grape on granite soils traditionally. And so to be able to, taste a South African version of that, when we work with new varieties, and I'm sure the Newton-Johnsons are the same, and it takes a long time to bring new varieties in. It's a 7-year quarantine process. It's, 3 years in the ground before you can start to harvest the grapes. So, and then you still have to make the wine. So it's like a 15-year process to work with new varieties. And so, there's no instant gratification in winemaking. And when you make these experimental decisions, people will either think you were visionaries or absolutely insane. But I think the Newton-Johnsons are definitely visionaries.
All right. So we'll agree to disagree on that one then. They have given us something very special in the Albarino, as you and Chris have given us with so many of your wines. The Old Vine White, I haven't given people a price yet for this box, but the moment they hear Mullineux, they're immediately thinking, well, this is going to cost us 6 figures minimum. But it's not, because what we've got here is wine that's very much at the top end of the South African white blend scale, and yet somehow it's wine that you're able to produce at a fraction of what it might cost as an equivalent wine, certainly internationally. The old is the bit that grabs everybody's attention, because we know these are vines with terrific heritage and then used by the right winemaking hands. Give us a sense of this wine and what makes it stand out.
Well, this is one of the first wines that Chris and I started making together. So when we started the winery in 2007, we had what we called our signature range, and this was the core of that for our white wine. It's predominantly old vine Chenin Blanc. The vines are up to 70 years old, and on a combination of our granite soils, our schist soils, and our iron soils that really are the kind of trifecta of Swartland soil types. And then it's also a real signature style of wine for the Swartland. It captures the sunshine. It shows the complexity of texture, a real signature being Chenin based. And then each winery that makes one also blends in varieties that work well on their properties. So in our case, it's also blended with Viognier for an aromatic lift, Claret Blanche brings an incredible sort of beeswaxy texture. Grenache Blanc has the zippy acidity. Verdelho is also brings an amazing freshness considering the Swartland sunshine. And then with the added variety of Semillon Gris, so one of the most rare varieties in the world. And even Jancis Robinson refers to it as a South African phenomenon. And that brings sort of a phenolic grip because of the Gris phenolics. So it's got the florals, the mouthfeel, the texture, a little bit of phenolics, goes great with food. Chefs love it around the world because of that layered complexity.
Got me very thirsty already. I love it because it is such magnificent wine for all the reasons Andrea has mentioned. And then the one that she won't, and that is because she and Chris make it, which gives it a seal of considerable approval. Pieter Walser, I'm going to ask a question I know the answer to, but I'll ask it anyway. We can count you, I'm sure, amongst those many, many, many fans of the Mullineux Magicians.
Absolutely. Wow, that's... we really, I mean, when I started my business, there wasn't much around. And I think the big change came when they came into the business. I mean, when I started, there was no kind of a premium market for wine. I was kind of doing my thing and not pricing my wines really high at that stage, just doing a lot of different stuff, didn't really know where I was going. And then the Mullineux came in with a couple of other guys as well. And they basically just kind of broke into this magnificent kind of thing they were doing into a market that no one could access, of course, with a bunch of other guys as well. And I kind of wasn't part of it. I kind of just went in their slipstream, which I will always be very grateful for.
Well, it's a slipstream that many have followed on for, some with considerable success. You are definitely one of those, and with a wonderfully distinctive approach to wine, Pieter, where it can be a small amount of wine. If you think it is good enough and deserves to be made, then you will make it. And that is exactly what you've done for a contribution to our first red box for the new Dan Really Likes Wine selection. And that is a Walker Bay Syrah. It's a very limited edition. You can only get it through the Dan Really Likes Wine selection. That's how little there is. Tell us about this wine and this Walker Bay Syrah that's going to be a star attraction for our opening month.
Okay, so as I mentioned before, I like learning about things by making wines. My thing is, people maybe don't always know this, but we basically make the same wines year on year nowadays. So let's call it 99% of other wines we make the same wines. So we try, and we've got quite a strong connection to many different sites. And these wines came with us for quite a number of years. So those wines are kind of a fixed range. But then that little 1%, we learn from stuff. So it might be a vineyard, and in this case, it's a vineyard close to Botrevier. So if you drive over Salaris Pass up to Grabouw side, you go all the way to Botrevier. And if you go into the little town of Botrevier, you kind of you drive through it on the way to Luddite Wines. There's the Van der Stel Pass. It's a long gravel road. You carry on with that road for probably about I would say 10 kilometers, and there's this mountain lodge called Kol. And as you arrive at this place, you turn left into this mountain lodge. They've got these little pods in the mountain with those. It's quite well known nowadays. These hot tubs, these wood-fired hot tubs. So that's where the whole thing originated. So as you go into Kol, there's two little vineyards in the entrance. So I've known about that for a couple of years. And then I got one of it is Shiraz. And I got hold of a small bit of Shiraz in 2021. And it's the Hoek Mountains up there. It's part of the Groenland, Green Land Mountain range. And nice coffee clip soils, like little coffee stones. beautiful little vineyard. So the guy gave me enough grapes to make 2 barrels. So kind of our approach is, we know we're going to make it for 1 year. We've got no relation to that specific vineyard. So we have very limited knowledge when we do a wine like this. So when we get the grapes to the cellar, I know a bit about the vineyard. So I bring that kind of information to the cellar. And everybody in the cellar gets a bunch of grapes. So obviously we try and I tell them exactly what's going on in the vineyards. And then we basically taste the grapes. And then each guy needs to strip his bunch of berries because it's Shiraz. And then they've got to eat the stem. So each guy gets about 3 stems to eat. And then basically after that, we have a kind of a discussion on the ripeness level of the grapes, the flavor of the skins, the taste of the stems. And then we kind of work out a plan and we say, okay, it's going to be maybe 50% whole bunch, or it's going to be whatever we decide. And that's kind of the approach we take. With this wine, I can't remember what we did. So it was on that moment, and I forgot what we did. But it fermented. We put it into older oak that I know, and we bottled it. And then basically, you wanted something special, so I said to you, you can have it, but you have to take everything. So yes, you will be taking everything.
And very, very, very happily so. I mean, this in itself is a reason to get the red box for month 1. But there are several other reasons. One of them would be the same grape, although going under the Shiraz moniker rather than Syrah. Henry, it wasn't that long ago we had you on the show talking about this wonderful side hustle that you and your wife have together. Run us through this Pilgrim Shiraz. And I remember quite distinctly the twinkle in your eye when you spoke about it when you were on the show last time. This is a very special wine for you.
Yeah, it is, Dan. I think I can sort of mimic the sentiments of working with a parcel for the first time as Pieter, and not having to eat many stems. I definitely did smell and taste a lot of them because the first vintage, the first time we made the Pilgrim Shiraz was in 2019, and I think my let's say winemaking skills, or thought of what I was trying to do was to make a sort of a deep dark Shiraz type wine akin to I don't even want to say it live, but something like a Penfold Grange. That was sort of sticking in my head. This is what it should be. This is what I want to do. But obviously, winemaking never makes the wine. It's all about the grapes, and running through the first vintage, the area where it's grown up on the foothills of the Stellenbosch mountain, immediately told me, you're not going to be able to do this. I'm not going to become that which you've got in your mind. So either you budge or it's not going to turn out as you planned. And obviously, I made a on the fly decision to add quite a bit of stem from the first vintage because, yeah, like I'm sure Pieter can attest, the stems are tasty. They're really, really nice. So we added some stems and did a little bit of whole bunch on the first vintage, and let's say that balance of old world, new world Shiraz, Syrah and Shiraz styles were just phenomenal. Trying to appeal sort of to different taste buds and bring two styles together, that sort of became sort of relevant in my mind. And yeah, the 2019 did really well, and then we went on to 2020 and 21. And each year, your palate sort of evolves, not because you become a sort of more cellar tuned and becomes a cellar palate, but you sort of realize what these grapes can do, and it evolves to a point of what can we achieve in the bottle. So each year we sort of went up with 15% whole bunch, 25% whole bunch. The 21 is at about 35% whole bunch, adding a lot of stems as well to get to that perfect balance of really sweet, plummy violet fruit, but also having a nice peppery spice. And I think it really lingers on the palate. it's a great wine to have now, because Shiraz is one of those cultivars that it can age really well, but it just comes over as this extremely lush, plush cashmere type of wine with beautiful flavors and elegance. So yeah, a really nice wine, if I say so myself.
It never ceases to both amaze and delight me just how much winemakers still get joy out of everything they do, and Henry making it so vividly clear there. Michael, before I ask you about the very, very, very cool wine that you've allowed us to add to our offering for the first Dan Really Likes Wine selection, we've got in the last two wine producers, Pilgrim Shiraz, the Black Bottle Syrah. They're both 2021. They're both from the same grape. For people early on in their wine journey, they might go, well, you know, these will be pretty similar. It's kind of the same bottle. It's the same grape. It's the same year. This is a really cool way of taking two wines that are from the same country, from the same grape, from the same vintage, and yet are going to deliver something so wonderfully different. We still got you there, Michael?
Yes, Dan, I think there's not many wines that can boast a maiden vintage of 1932. Perhaps only Chateau Libertas can do that in South Africa. So we're proud to present for your selection the Chateau Libertas 1994, a 30-year-old blend that to some are legendary. Since inception, so obviously I'm not a winemaker, I look after the stuff once it's made. So originally made by Charles Winshaw in the 1930s, but also by people like Dame Pete Bailey, Jan de Waal, Michael Buchholz, Wouter Pinaar. It's always been a Cabernet-driven blend with a golden thread of Cinsault in it, at least until the 1990s, and including some of the more modern vintages. This particular wine is 60% Cabernet, 30% Cinsault, and 20% Cinsault and 20% Merlot. And it is amazing after 30 years how vibrant this wine is still. Really medium-bodied, showing elegance, oodles of red berries with some touches of forest floor. Really, really light and enjoyable even after 30 years.
Well, I have to say really big thank you, Michael, because you've been enormously generous. This comes from the treasure trove that is the Tabernacle and the Vinoteque. And we have as a headline act a 1994 bottle of Chateau Libertas as part of your selection to sign up for. And I've had this wine a couple of times in the last year or two, and on every occasion it has been quite brilliant, and I'm really excited to be able to give you not just a wine that's really good, but a wine that's got so much history and is taking you way back in time. So a great selection of wine that we have. Those aren't the only ones, and I want to dip in as we've got our assorted winemaking talent and just get some thoughts on some of the other wine. Andrea, there are a number of your fellow Swartlanders. We have the Royhuan Semillon from Jasper Wickens at Trevert, and we've also got some Grenache from the very quiet and restrained young winemaker that is Martin Lamprecht. Grenache from Maris, Semillon from Jasper Wickens in the red and white boxes respectively. Again, two wines I certainly think are really lovely ones to try, and both offer something a little different, but something really lovely.
Yeah, Grenache in the Swartland's amazing. So the oldest Grenache in the country is in the Swartland. It happens to be on Adi Badenhorst farm. But Grenache is one of the most, beautiful, fragrant. It tends to be a little bit lighter in color, but has amazing fragrance and incredible tannin structure to it. Just because it's lighter in color doesn't mean that it doesn't have like a lot of power and exciting aromatics to it. So I absolutely adore Grenache. It goes with a whole multitude of foods as well, which always makes wine fun, is when you can just crack open a bottle and, you know, have it with whatever you're having. It evokes conversation. Then you want to open another bottle. It's kind of what wine's about. And then the Roy Kroon Semillon. So that is also Semillon Gris. Phenomenal history to Semillon Gris. So Semillon made up 90% of all plantings in South Africa and in the early 1800s. So much so that they just called it groendruif, or green grape, pardon my accent. And then by the mid 1800s, 50% of that, so 45% of all vineyards in South Africa had mutated, a positive mutation, into Semillon Gris, meaning that the skins had gone from being, you know, a green or a yellow skin into much more of a burnished, kind of a light red color skin. So a natural mutation that took place. And as I mentioned, Jancis Robinson refers to it as a South African phenomenon. They don't know if it was the clone of Semillon, if it was the soils, if it was the sunshine, but for some reason it's a change that took place in South Africa and isn't officially documented anywhere else. So it's such a rare, such a uniquely South African variety. And then obviously when phylloxera took out all the vineyards, you know, in the end of the 1800s and things were replanted, Semillon was no longer the #1 grape variety that was planted around South Africa. Obviously, there was still a lot of Chenin. Cinsault was planted, Cabernet, eventually Chardonnay, and the varieties that we see more often today. But Semillon has a very deep-rooted history in South Africa, and Roy Kroon Semillon, or Semillon Gris, is particularly unique to this amazing viticultural country.
So a big part of what we're hoping to do here at Dan Really Likes Wine Selection is introduce you to wine with a slightly different story and a bit of history. You got a wonderful lesson there from Andrea, and your chance now to try this wine that was so prolific so long ago, and I feel is making something of a comeback, and people like Jasper Wickens are playing a big part in that comeback. Pieter, two of the other wines we have, the Pieter White Blend, Wynand Grobler making that initially in Franschhoek. He's now just moved up to the old Tulbach Mountain Vineyards, and the labeling is great, which I know is something that will certainly appeal to you, Pieter. And we've also got some wine from a varietal that is kind of making a comeback and almost making its debut in a premium space over the last few years, and that would be Colombar and the Bare Bones Colombar from Blacksmith and from Tremaine. A word or two there from you, Pieter, those labels in particular from Pieter and also the rise of Colombar.
So actually one of the varieties I don't make is Colombar, for no particular reason. It just hasn't come across my path. Both those labels are really great. The Creature, many years ago, I saw that combination of strange kind of animals, like an owl with fish fins and weird feet. And it's always been a super creative brand and super interesting things. Tremaine, I know really well. He's like completely off the wall, making some really great wines. And with Colombar, I mean, there's lots of opportunity with that. Colombar has got a really great acidity. There's loads and loads of old vineyards around, especially if you go towards, I know Worcester maybe doesn't sound like, or Rawsonville, the greatest of areas when it comes to well-known premium areas. But there's lots of old vines there. I was in the agricultural high school, Boland Landbouw, many years ago, and I've got I met loads of brandy drinking farmers there, and we're still very good friends, and a lot of them farm in that area. So there's old vines there. I mean, Gunther Schultz, he makes also a great Colombar. So a lot of guys focusing on that freshness, acidity, lots of old vines. So yeah, super interesting variety. Maybe one day I'll try it.
I wouldn't put it past you, Peter, and I'll be front of the queue when that does happen. We've had a Colombard show not that long ago, not just straight Colombard, but the Silverthorn team making a Colombard from bubbles and delivering a great result there as well. So something we will see more of, and maybe some Pieter Walser as well. We spoke about the Albarino of the Newton-Johnsons a little earlier on. Ginny Povel's Albarino, mentioned by Angela Lloyd, who's watching the show at the moment. It is an excellent example from the limited number we have in South Africa. Gordon, you made the point of Sauvignon Blanc by way of comparison. Well, we've got a Sauvignon Blanc in our opening salvo. In this case, it is a wooded Sauvignon Blanc. And this comes from someone, Gordon, you know well, because you have played the same role within the Cape Winemakers Guild over the years and worked very closely. That would be Samantha O'Keefe. And some wooded Sauvignon Blanc that may open the eyes to people who perhaps haven't had Sauvignon Blanc with a bit of barrel to it, and perhaps haven't experienced just what that touch of wood can do to transform the grape and the resultant wine.
Yeah, I think, Samantha, she's in a very unique place. And I think that wine actually comes from her own vineyards in Greyton. And yeah, I think that place always amazes me. I mean, she harvests a lot of her grapes even later than the Himmelanada as well. So she's got a bit of altitude. She's got those lovely shale soils kind of in the foothills of the Rufusona End Mountains there behind her. And yeah, with like everything with Samantha, everything she does is amazing. And also a wooded Sauvignon, which, it's been years since I've tried to make a wooded Sauvignon, and I always found it very difficult. I think Bartu Ekstien was probably more my mentor in that department, and I learned under him in my early years. And obviously a lot about Sauvignon, back then when he was starting to taste a lot of the Cloudy Bay wines and the Takoko wines, which, was also wooded, and in a very different style. So, I like Blanc Fumé Sauvignons. I think they bring something a little bit extra. Again, a lot more texture from the barrel, or being in barrel. And just always very difficult to get right. And I haven't tasted that wine recently, but I'm sure Sam has got it right.
Bevan, just from you, from a marketing perspective, as we sum up the white offering in the Dan Really Likes Wine selection that kicks off in June, but is available to start signing up to now. They're two distinctive, quite different white blends, and then 4 white varietals that many people won't be drinking on a regular basis, from your own Albarino to a wooded Sauvignon Blanc, the Semillon, and then the Colombard. There's a great opportunity here in this collection to jump into a very different world of wine, and I think come up smiling at the discoveries you're set to make.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's been touched on a bit tonight. I mean, wine offers, we're all here for it, but wine offers so much. And for me, the one thing that's underlying for wine is it's about discovery. Not that I play golf, but it's your language. But I kind of say that if anyone ever says that they've perfected golf, it's the day they misunderstand it. And I think if anyone ever thinks they've perfected wine or understanding it, that's the day they've lost it completely. So it's boxes like this that allow people to sort of maybe put away their old favorites for a while and discover something new and to see what's going on. I mean, even 1 or 2 of them, as Pieter was mentioning tonight, I was unaware of. Yeah, sometimes guilty of not getting off the farm enough. And a box like that really just opens it up and just gives you something that has been selected and thought through a bit, and then gives you a little bit of a walk around the Cape. We see it with now at the end of our summer, a lot of foreign guests coming through. And in certain ways, they're obviously, thankfully, very excited and energized by the Cape. But also, they don't understand actually how condensed it is. Yeah, even if Pieter is in Helderberg and Andrea's in the Swartland, it's only 2.5 hours, but the difference in where we work and what we're working with is immense. And that offers visitors and people that want to try boxes like this an immense variety and array of flavors and things to discovery.
If it's got Bevan's thumbs up, then I'm a very, very happy man with that opening salvo. We do have one other special guest to jump to in a moment, but just before we chat to Jason to wrap up the show from Norman Goodfellows, let's get a quick word on the remaining 2 red wines from our red selection. You've heard Michael talk about the 1994 Chateau Libertas. He is our resident expert on older wine. 2016 Oldenmans Proprietors Blend, 2017 Oldenburg Cabernet Franc complete the red selection. Not quite as old, Michael, as the 94 perhaps, but still a really nice opportunity for people to get some wine that is a little pre-aged, so to speak, and taste some wine that if you bought it on release, you'd have to be very patient with and hang on to for a while to get it to this point.
Definitely, I believe, especially where red wine is concerned, there's definitely some benefit with short to medium term aging, and it just showcases what our wines are capable of.
All right, we just lost Michael at the end there, but we certainly got the gist of what he was saying, and that is that the beauty of South African wine, not just red, white as well, but reds over the longer term, to just develop into something even more perfect and beautiful with some time, is one that richly rewards the patience required, unless, of course, you're buying the Dan Really Likes Wine Red Selection, in which case your 94 Chateau Libertas, your 2016 Proprietors Blend Holdenmans, and your 27 Oldenburg Cabernet Franc are already there and waiting to go. Jason McAvoy is the CEO of Norman Goodfellows. We're working very excitedly on this project. He joins us now, having just finished a champagne breakfast that he went off to 11 hours ago. I know there's a big smile on the face there, Jace, because both the white and the red selection, as all of our winemakers have attested to, just some really cool, different, interesting wine that's going to give people a wonderful and comprehensive wine experience.
Dan, I'm very excited about this for 2 reasons. One is I think that it's a unique offering, in that you don't often get to buy wines that are pre-aged. I like that terminology. The second is that my own wine fridge at home is embarrassingly stocked full of both wine fridges stocked full of current vintage wines, and I really need to get into the discipline of buying wine and holding it. Which I've not been so good at. So this wine club gives me an opportunity to get some wine with some age on it, which really does drink better.
Well, this is the point, Jason, where we're able to give people the news they've probably been waiting through the show for. 6 terrific bottles of white, 6 fantastic bottles of red, really interesting grapes, wonderful varietals. And you're probably thinking, well, this is going to be nudging close to 5 figures a case. If not quite that high, then certainly well into the multiple thousands. What we've managed to do, and again, it's a big thank you to the winemakers who've bought in so enthusiastically to what we're looking to do. 1,500 Rand is your white box, 1,800 Rand is your red box. You're the man who's got the numbers to work somehow. I'm very happy that they have. But it does do, I think, what we both set out to do, Jace, which is take wine that sits in the upper to premium category and delivers it at what is still, if you are a real wine enthusiast, a price that's not completely out of reach.
So I think 2 things. One is that the partnership with the winemakers has helped us get to the price points, and the second is that this is around making something that's really exciting that you're going to tell all your friends who enjoy wine or mildly enjoy wine or want to experience more about wine. We've sacrificed margin here in terms of getting this out there and making it really exciting. So this is spread the word and let's build this club to something quite exciting.
All right, well, that is the plan. And we're going to be doing so not just with the winemakers you've seen on the show today and the winemakers we've mentioned in the opening June boxes, but July and August are already taking shape, and on we go. And you can subscribe for the full year to both white and to red. And the one thing we will guarantee is that every single month there's going to be something that takes you pleasantly by surprise. and really, really happy that is the case. Which leads me not just to say thank you to Jason for throwing the weight of Norman Goodfellows behind this project and the excitement therein, but our producers have joined us on the show today. Andrea, it is always a delight having you on, and thank you for giving us the Mullineux royalty to add to our opening box. Michael with the 1994 Chateau Libertas, thank you very, very much indeed. Henry and the Pilgrim wines, the brothers Newton-Johnson and Albarino, that's been a favorite of mine for so long, and Pieter Walser in absentia, who I think he said just sent me a message. Unfortunately, but yeah, Henry, Andrea, Michael, Gordon, Bevan, thank you guys so much. We're really excited to have you all on board with this, and I think I'm going to discover some great wine. Hopefully, everybody else will, and we're going to see plenty more of yours as the years unfold and our Dan Really Likes Wine selection gathers pace. So a big thank you, and raising a very happy glass to you all.
Yes.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Yeah.
Thank you much.
Cheers.
There we go. It's a seminal day for Dan Really Likes Wine, here together with Norman Goodfellows, delivering our first, slightly overdue, but finally here, and with great joy, Dan Really Likes Wine selection. You can opt for the white box at 1,500 Rand or the red box at 1,800 Rand. Go for both if you're a major wine fan. In either case, you've got wine that is from different producers, from unexpected varietals, from slightly older vintages, from estates and from producers you won't often find so easy to access. And that's thanks to the support that the producers you saw today and many, many others over the coming months and years have given to Dan Really Likes Wine. For that, I am very, very grateful, as I am to Jason and Bali and the Norman Goodfellows team as we get this chapter underway with Dan Really Likes Wine that I'm greatly excited about. If you haven't signed up, we'll have all the details on the Dan Really Likes Wine pages, as well as Norman Goodfellows, and you'll have the opportunity shortly to subscribe to the Dan Really Likes Wine newsletter that will help guide you on these wines as well. And all told, just a wonderful opportunity to celebrate great wine producers, and this extraordinary product that continues to put smiles on faces, not just in South Africa, but all around the world, and gives you from next month through the selection the chance to experience something that hopefully you won't have before, but will delight in doing for the very first time. And that wraps us up for today. Thank you very, very much for joining us on Dan Really Likes Wine. Look forward to you being part of our wine selection journey, and we'll see you back on the show again on Thursday. Until then, happy drinking, sign up for your selection, and a big thank you to some wonderful winemakers for joining us on the show today. See you on Thursday. Goodbye. Are you one of those people who gets a little nervous around a wine list? You're not sure about wine speak. It's all just this slightly intimidating blur? Well, never fear. Here's the Dan Really Likes Wine guide to getting wine speak just right. Use terms that when you think about them are absolutely meaningless. There's a drifting eloquence to the wine as it meanders into a sense of place. A real sense of diplomacy to the way this wine has been constructed. Every now and again, throw in a completely random sporting analogy. You definitely, the moment you drink this, you know that the winemaker's given 110%. Pick an exotic destination or location that sounds cool but is actually utterly irrelevant. It reminds me of a wine I had in a restaurant in Honduras many years ago. It has the swirling brilliance of an afternoon in Copenhagen as autumn is just setting in and you get the feel of what's to come. Make up a fruit from some faraway country that nobody will ever know isn't real. If you've ever had butterfly fruit from Moldova, that's exactly what you're getting on this. Drift off cheerfully into a poetic cul-de-sac. It's a wine that at first shuffles awkwardly from one foot to the next, then all of a sudden breaks free and flies like a flamingo across a dance floor of molten chocolate. It has a poetic vibrancy, a lyricism that's utterly, utterly silent. Pick a familiar food item that nobody really knows the taste or smell of. Just straight away, you just get bay leaf on this. Throw in terms off the top of your head that sound brilliant, but are really saying nothing. It's so utterly brazen and yet just completely subdued. you get the sense that the wine's really at one with the winemaker, and they just came together to make this. Look wistfully while saying things that sound truly important. And it's a wine you get a sense will never go out of fashion until it does. It's hard not to feel the winemaker was in a really good space when this wine was produced. It's wine that takes very natural root, beginning on the nose, working its way through the palate, and then finishing off. And in many ways, it's not even a wine. It's more of a dance, more of a pas de deux, more of you and the glass coming together for something that resonates with a magic that's so difficult to put a finger on. Pick tasting notes as crazy and out there as you possibly can. Just the most delicate splash of Ethiopian coffee. Just that rasping recollection of Egyptian sage. Run absolutely wild with your vocabulary. Just make sure you don't accidentally say something that makes sense. And in the moment you've seen the colour, the moment you've taken in that nose, it's just so blindingly apparent that here's a winemaker who's a Sagittarius. One of those spectacular wines that just ages up to a point where it doesn't. It just has an innuendo of earthiness. It's a wine that looks at you and shouts at you in the most beautiful whisper. And with just a single mouthful, you do get that sense that here is a wine that's both made in the cellar, but also made in the vineyard. You almost get the sense from the purity here that they've actually peeled the grapes before they've picked them and turned them into something that is such nectar of assorted gods. Alternatively, if you'd really like to learn something about wine, sign up for the brand new Dan Really Likes Wine monthly subscription, a box of red or a box of white in partnership with Norman Goodfellows. All the wine I've chosen myself, wine that's older, that's more unusual, that's made from smaller or more out-of-the-way producers, or wine you just probably haven't come across before. All available via Norman Goodfellows on the Dan Really Likes Wine store. Sign up, get drinking, and turn all of those wine tasting notes into something a little more meaningful.